I demolished your family home. I was speechless, stunned by these sudden words from my husband. Recently, after my father passed away, I inherited the family home and land. My husband had always talked about demolishing my family home to build a duplex, and it seems he finally took drastic measures. I reprimanded him through tears for destroying the home filled with family memories, but he just sneered at me in mockery. It was tough to do the demolition myself, but I managed to clear the land. My name is Mary. I am currently 27 years old, living with my husband Tom, who is 3 years older than me. We don't have children yet. Before marriage, I lived with my father at our family home, working hard every day. My mother passed away when I was in high school, so since then, it's just been my father and me, supporting each other. I planned to work right after high school and did so, joining a local company. I'm still employed there, even after getting married. I've always enjoyed my work environment and found daily motivation in my job. Tom, my husband, is a bit unreliable, but has been kind since we were dating, helping with household chores when he can. Our married life is satisfactory. However, the only problem for me has been the relationship with Tom's parents. Initially, I wanted to get along with my future in-laws, but they seemed to dislike me, always cold, and our relationship only grew more distant. Gradually, I became tired of interacting with them and now try to avoid any trouble. Luckily, we don't live with or often see Tom's parents. If we were under the same roof, I might have collapsed from the stress by now. Having my father in the same city was a comfort. While the relationship with my in-laws was a concern, I thought we could continue our peaceful married life without major conflicts. But then, my father recently passed away from a sudden heart attack. The shock of losing my beloved father was immense. After the funeral, I spent days crying alone in my childhood home. Considering my job and life with Tom, I couldn't mourn forever and have only just started to recover. With my father's death, I inherited the now uninhabited family home and land. With my mother gone and no siblings, my father's estate naturally came to me. Tom and I began discussing what to do with my family home more frequently after I completed the inheritance process. My father had said, "Mary, after I'm gone, you can do whatever you want with the house and land." Meaning the decision on what to do with the now vacant home was up to me. The house, filled with many memories, is precious to me. I don't want to sell the land or demolish the house, at least not for now. Despite the property taxes, I'd like to occasionally clean the house and immerse myself in the memories of my parents. That's why I want to maintain the status quo for a while. But Tom had a different opinion. When I inherited the assets, he was as excited as if they were his own. "It's a waste to leave it as is. We've got good land now. Let's make immediate use of it." Tom was eager to utilize the land where my family home stood, and our opinions were sharply divided. Indeed, the location was good, with a decent distance from the station and nearby amenities like a large supermarket. However, the house, built before I was born, is old and needs many repairs. I thought about renovating it for our future children, but I just couldn't accept Tom's approach. He talked about my family home as if it were his own, pushing the issue forcefully. My in-laws also got wind of it and acted similarly. They talked as if we would all move to that land, leaving me, the inheritor, feeling excluded. Watching the jubilant Tom and his parents, I feared they would do as they pleased with my family home. So I repeatedly emphasized to Tom, "That house and land are mine, not yours or your parents. Please don't make any decisions without me." However, Tom responded to my words. "I get it, Mary. You worry too much." He dismissed my concerns lightly, never taking them seriously. I thought he was a gentle, albeit unreliable person. But ever since I inherited my father's estate, he changed, barely listening to me during discussions. This led to my growing suspicion of Tom. On a certain holiday, amid this situation, Tom left home early to visit his parents, and I was catching up on household chores. However, less than an hour later, he returned with his parents, interrupting my work. While they might be good parents to Tom, given the situation with my family home, I found it hard to interact with them. "Ben, Susan, what brings you here today?" I was taken aback by their unannounced visit, having not heard anything from Tom about it.
We wanted to finally decide what to do with Mary's family home, so I asked Dad and Mom to come.
Tom replied with a beaming smile. My bad feeling about this was proving true, sinking my heart. But I've said multiple times that I want to maintain the status quo. I stated firmly, to which Tom quickly retorted,
That's such a waste. I've said it before, too. So I'm thinking of demolishing your family home and building a new house on that land. We could live there with Dad and Mom.
What? His absurd suggestion left me dumbfounded, but I quickly countered. What are you talking about? That's out of the question. Didn't I tell you not to decide anything on your own? My desperate opposition only earned me disapproving looks from his parents. Eventually, Ben sighed wearily and spoke.
Leaving such good land unused is a waste. It's high time you take Tom's word seriously. A wife should obey her husband.
Unable to say that, Tom never took my word seriously. I remained silent. His parents obviously sided with their son. Moreover, Ben, with his rigid mindset, believed a wife should naturally obey her husband. If I were to oppose Tom in front of Ben,
what a way to speak for a daughter-in-law,
he would likely scold. Right, Mary. We're getting older and might need care any time. It's obviously better to live together in a duplex. Considering the future, we'd feel secure with you and Tom. Susan chimed in next with her gentle tone. Despite her words, I suspected Susan just wanted to live with us to avoid housework. When Ben wasn't around, her attitude towards me changed drastically, becoming more spiteful. Whenever I visited their home and was alone with Susan, she'd meddle unnecessarily, asking about grandchildren or pushing house chores onto me, citing her age. If I resisted, "Aren't you supposed to respect your elders? How were you raised to not even understand that?" she'd persistently complain. I couldn't bear the thought of living with my in-laws, who always treated me with disdain. That house is filled with memories of my parents and me. I have no intention of demolishing it. Please leave it be for now. I stood firm on my stance. However, Tom and his parents seemed unwilling to give up. Stubborn daughter-in-law, considering the future. It's obvious we should build a duplex and live together. Your parents are gone, so you should devote yourself to us now. Susan's dismissive reference to my parents nearly made me grimace, but I managed to maintain composure. In the end, the day concluded with each of us sticking to our opinions, and his parents left in dissatisfaction. Since then, Tom and I have been at odds over the family home and land.
Current house is small, and we should build a bigger one for when we have kids, right?
Tom remained adamant about building a duplex. It seemed he just wanted to live in a large house with his beloved parents. I understood the desire to live with one's parents, but I never agreed. I was sure living with my in-laws would only lead to more conflicts. So despite the demolition of my family home, I've consistently and firmly refused the idea of building a duplex every time it came up. This would always sour Tom's mood. As these days went on, our marital relationship gradually worsened, with no progress in our discussions. Whenever I had time, I visited my family home to clean and maintain it. However, during a busy period at work, I couldn't visit for about a month, so I brought my parents' portraits to our current home to keep them during this busy time. I hadn't mentioned this to Tom, as our conversations often escalated into arguments, so I decided to keep it to myself. But what happened next made me glad I had moved the portraits. It was on a holiday, right after the busy period ended. I had expected a relaxing day, but my in-laws unexpectedly visited that morning. It was the first time I saw them since the last discussion about the family home, partly due to my busy schedule. This visit was unannounced, and Tom hadn't informed me about their coming. They both seemed unusually cheerful, laughing with Tom as they looked at me. "Today we have something important to discuss with you, Mary," Susan said with a broad smile. I had a feeling this would not be good news. "What is it you want to discuss?" As I asked, Tom stepped forward and said,
"Your family home. I've demolished it."
I was speechless, initially thinking it was a cruel joke. But seeing Tom and my in-laws smiling triumphantly, I realized it was true. "How could you do something like that without permission?" My attempt to confront Tom was met with him smugly laughing at me. Unbelievably, Tom had demolished my family home without my consent, the rightful owner. Due to my recent work commitments, I hadn't been able to check on the house. It seemed Tom had seized this opportunity.
It was tough doing the demolition myself, but I managed to clear the land.
Tom boasted, feigning exhaustion. He had performed the demolition himself to avoid expenses, borrowing heavy machinery from Ben. Ben, who owns a small factory and has several pieces of heavy equipment, lent them without hesitation to help his son clear the land. Why would you do something like that without asking? I've always been against demolishing it. I couldn't forgive Tom and his parents' actions, pleading tearfully. The family home still had many of my parents' belongings, childhood family albums, and other memories. The only thing that survived were the portraits I had brought home. Everything else was gone, like a nightmare. How could you do something so horrible? I will never forgive you for this. I reached my breaking point. Despite my glaring, the three of them maintained their smug attitudes.
You were always so indecisive, so I created a catalyst. We can't wait forever for you to change your mind.
Tom's attitude was arrogant, as if he had done the right thing. Continuing, he said with a big laugh,
So your family's homeland. I've taken it.
Laughing as if he owned it. Watching Tom boast like he was the owner filled me with disgust, rapidly extinguishing any love I had for him. Tom and his parents seemed oblivious to the gravity of their actions, and I sighed deeply. What are you talking about? When did I ever say I gave you that land? Without any legal procedures, it's still mine. Tom and his parents looked puzzled, not fully understanding my words. I hadn't gone through any formalities for transferring the land, so I had no recollection of giving the family home or land to Tom. So naturally, demolishing someone else's house without permission is a crime. You might not know because you didn't go through proper contractor, but what you did is punishable by law, I said, and at my words, Tom's expression stiffened. If he had hired a contractor for the demolition, he would have known. I have no intention of showing mercy just because we are a married couple, I continued. Moreover, even as a couple, using heavy machinery on someone else's land without permission is a crime. And it doesn't matter if the machinery belongs to Ben's company. Using it without permission is still a crime. I will definitely sue you for this. Previously, I had researched real estate-related legal offenses for a property I inherited from my father, just in case of any trouble. I never thought Tom would actually resort to such drastic measures. When I mentioned the heavy machinery, Ben, who had been looking relaxed until then, shouted angrily,
Wait a minute, you two are married, so your land is practically Tom's as well, right? Then demolishing that house shouldn't be a crime.
I've said it multiple times, but I am the owner of the house, not Tom. Besides, I wasn't even informed or consented to the demolition. What he did is a criminal act, so I will report this to the police. I can't just stay silent after my precious home was destroyed without permission. I replied calmly, and Ben was at a loss for words. He seemed to have taken this issue lightly. Even though he lent the company's machinery for the demolition of the house, he apparently never thought that I, his wife, would sue Tom. He probably thought that once the land was cleared, any excuse would do. Suing Tom? You're his wife, aren't you? You can't seriously be thinking of doing something so awful, right? As Ben fell silent, Susan shouted in panic. The awful ones are you, who demolished someone's house without permission. Being a wife or a married couple doesn't excuse this. After responding, I operated my mobile phone and showed Tom the screen I had searched. On the mobile phone screen was an explanation of the crime Tom had committed. What you did falls under the crime of property destruction. You're looking at a prison sentence without a fine.
Prison?
Ben cried out in distress, and Susan let out a short scream.
Wait, rethink the report. We're a couple, aren't we?
Tom, his face pale, clung to my arm, but I shook off his hand firmly and accused him. That's why you shouldn't use our marriage as an excuse. There's no going back now. My family home is gone, destroyed by you along with all its memories. Then, I declared decisively and decided to report to the police on the spot. I'm calling the police now. It seemed Tom finally realized the irreparable mistake he had made.
Arrested? Me? This can't be happening.
He mumbled, trembling, and finally collapsed in front of me. Afterward, Tom was arrested, and I left the house we lived in as a couple and rented an apartment near where my family home used to be. I had already been considering divorce, but Tom refused, so the negotiations through lawyers were dragging on. Therefore, I was also considering a court-mediated divorce. Meanwhile, I had hired a lawyer and a detective agency to gather information about Tom. What came to light was that Tom had been visiting nightclubs frequently for several years and had a secret debt. It seemed he had his eye on my inheritance from my father, thinking he could pay off his entire debt once a substantial amount of money came into my hands. I was speechless and appalled when I found out the truth. Tom had even discussed his debts with his parents, and unbelievably, they had become his guarantors. I could picture his parents agreeing immediately to help their dear son. With Tom arrested, the repayment of his debt was stalled, and his parents were now cleaning up his mess. Then one day, out of the blue, I received a call from Susan. "Mary, help me!" Her voice was desperate, as she immediately clung to me for help. It turned out she was struggling financially and was being pressed to repay the debt Tom had left behind. "Mary, you have the inheritance left by your father, right? Please share some of that money with us." Susan had the audacity to ask me for such a thing. I had no intention of taking her request seriously. "I can't help you. You need to figure it out on your own," I replied bluntly and hung up the phone. Expecting another call soon, I decided to block my in-laws' phone number then and there. They don't know the address of the apartment I'm living in now, so they shouldn't be able to come knocking on my door. I never want to be involved with my in-laws or Tom ever again. Susan's call only strengthened my desire to quickly sever ties with Tom, leading me to decide on filing for a court-mediated divorce. After a while, the mediation was successful and we were divorced. Later, I heard that my in-laws had to sell their house and Ben's factory to pay off their debts. Now they're living modestly in a small apartment in the countryside. A few years later, after serving his sentence, Tom was released from prison, but his criminal record made it difficult for him to find a job again. He apparently got arrested again for committing minor crimes like shoplifting, but I felt nothing but disdain and no sympathy at all. After divorcing Tom, I started earning a stable income by renting out the land he had cleared. With the inheritance my father left me, I won't have any trouble living on my own, but I plan to continue working for a long time. Being free from Tom and his parents, I can now work more lively and without worries. As for remarrying, I haven't thought about it yet, so for the time being, I'm planning to enjoy my carefree single life while focusing on my work.